Well, this is it, guys. The leaderboards reset earlier today, and we're going to go over 10 tips to help you rank high this season. If you missed the reset time, no worries, they were a good 6 hours late on the reset, so not much grinding happened overnight, and most people will probably pick up after work or school later today. Now, let's go over some tips, and remember, this is one person's suggestions in a game that has thousands, if not millions, of strategies and play styles, so take them or leave them, mash them up with your own strategies, and of course, always feel free to leave your input in the comments. I would love to know what other people are having success with. Okay, so let's start off with some overall leaderboard tips, and if you're not sure how the board works, I have another video that makes it easy to understand you can watch later. Tip number 1, realize it is going to be a grind. This is not something you can accomplish during a few evening game sessions this weekend. If you're not prepared to or don't want to put a lot of time into grinding for rating, then this isn't for you. That being said, what else are you going to do while waiting for the new content? Tip number 2 is push for top 10 every game. This is crucial to climb the ladder and especially for maintaining a high rating. Once you're high on the board, you need to be placing at the very least in the top 10 to sustain your placement. Avoid taking all those risks you've been used to until you're in the top 10 placement. Well, even then, don't take risks. Once you hit number 10 in a round, take a deep breath and then get your head right back into the game. And just to console people a little bit, know that it is not the end of the world, especially in your first few rounds if you die early. You won't lose rating at a high rate starting out, and the way the momentum works, it'll be fast to climb back up as soon as you start winning or placing high again. So along with that previous tip, tip number 3 is avoid risky RNG plays. This means no more military base, school, prison, etc. Places where even if you're a great player, you're really at the mercy of the game and who it decides to give gear to. If you want the loot from some of those locations, you can still do the high loot, low risk strategies like dropping at this compound outside the prison, gearing up, and then waiting at the edge to kill the player that comes out on top. But in general, avoid those popular locations or other locations like the shelter or the shooting range where it's crucial to come up with a loadout quick and you have little options to fall back on. Tip number 4, secure a vehicle quickly. Preferably drop near one of these high vehicle spawn locations, usually the garages, and try to spot a vehicle on your way to the ground. A frequent cause of death is being forced to spend a lot of time moving out in the open, especially at a slow pace like on foot. Also, you do need to have as many options to fall back on as possible depending on where the circle lands and where other players are. A vehicle will open up many more options than if you're stuck on foot the whole game. Tip number 5, get outside the flight path quick. This goes back to avoiding popular locations and immediately acquiring a vehicle. For instance, if you have this lame flight path, immediately hit the west coast for a vehicle and bounce to the northern side of the map, like George Pool. You're going to want to spend more time looting than you normally do and more time hiding from engagement at the beginning of the round. So grabbing a vehicle first thing and getting to a high loot location far outside of the flight path will help you out with that. Tip number 6, play for placement, not for kills. If you understand how the overall rating is generated or watched our previous video about the leaderboards, you will know that your overall rating is massively biased toward your win rating at a 4-to-1 ratio. Only 20% of your kill rating carries over to the overall rating, whereas 100% of your win rating applies. This is why most of the tips are leaning more towards a passive play style. I don't want to say kills are completely irrelevant, as many of the top ranking players have very, very high KD ratios, but just make sure you're going for those kills through more consistent methods than, say, the roof of the school. Go for kills late game so that you can simultaneously place high even if you die. Tip number 7, spend more time looting than ever before. That might sound stupid, and no, don't get loot tunnel vision. Always be on your guard, and if someone drops into the same location as you, hunt as soon as you have a weapon. Keep track of other players. If you drive to George Pool first thing and someone else shows up, don't stop hunting them until they're dead. But what I mean by this is you're not going to live that more frivolous life we've been used to in PUBG, where you drop in, get a subpar to decent loadout, and immediately roll around the map guns blazing. Instead, you want to spend much more of the beginning alone in an area with tons of loot, getting the perfect setup for endgame. Great armor, the optics you need to win any engagement at any distance, lots of meds. In fact, you can prioritize meds over unlimited ammo because you'll be playing for longevity versus kills. Because you are going to spend so much time on the looting phase of a round and ideally picking up a vehicle first thing, go ahead and push the first supply drop if it's relatively near you. Most people don't go to the first drop because they have no transportation, are still looting, or are currently busy in a cat and mouse hunt or engaged in a firefight. Plus, anyone that does go for it most likely won't have a full loadout yet. And the wasted time isn't too important because you're almost guaranteed a great weapon, potentially good optics and armor, and you'll go right back to a long phase of looting. If anyone else is beating you to the drop, it's best to just turn around and avoid it. Tip number 8. Respect environmental deaths. The last thing you want is an unnecessary death marring your otherwise good rating. This means if you find yourself in the middle of a red zone, take shelter. I've always ignored red zones as they aren't a huge threat, but that has resulted in a handful of comical deaths, and that's why it's just not worth risking. Make sure when you do take shelter, you are as far towards the bottom middle of the building you are in, as there are freak incidents where you'll get blown up through a window, wall, or roof. Other game-related deaths to avoid would be long falls that kill you when exiting your parachute, so don't collide with the tops of trees, don't try to land on the radar tower at the military base, etc. And finally, safety first in those vehicles. Drive carefully, don't bail out while moving quickly, and be extra careful on motorbikes. I would hate to see someone die early from falling off of a bike. Tip number 9, push the 4th or 5th circle. So the reason you have so much time to hide away and loot is because you're trying to avoid constantly traversing the map and doing your best to stay safe until you can get a good sense of where the final circles are going to land. Usually that is around the 4th or 5th circle. At this point, the edge of the circle can become quite dangerous, so you're going to want to push into a highly defensible or hidden spot that is likely to keep you in or very near the center of the final few circles. From here, just try to control your area. Don't take unnecessary fights, but remove any immediate threats you can. And finally, tip number 10, stay hyper aware of the battlefield. Constantly absorb and keep track of every bit of information you can. This starts at the very beginning with taking note of where nearby enemies land and marking the closest threat on the map. People are going to be playing much differently than you're used to, since until today the leaderboards have been offline. Especially in higher ranks, it'll be a whole new ball game. Use your head to continually process how the game is playing out. Pay attention to the flight path in conjunction with the circle to know which side of the circle is most likely to be dangerous. Remember that the thick or fast-moving side of the blue circle is the biggest threat, as more players are being dispersed in that area. Listen and keep track of nearby firefights, and keep a very close eye on the kill feed to know who comes out on top of those fights and what their loadout is. Keep track of airdrops, as they are likely to have players coming and going from that area. And ultimately, think like a normal PUBG player would, and then play differently. Late game, a typical player would likely go to one of these buildings or compounds, so instead, maybe tuck into a rock or a geological divot here. Okay, there is much more I can say, but I really wanted to get this video up for you guys. Kind of a bonus tip is to play on FPP servers. I like FPP and third person equally, but I noticed the leaderboard for third person is already stacked with cheaters, so your choice, but something to take note of. If you would like more videos to help with leaderboard climbing, let me know. The most important thing I want to add is hopefully some of these tips help you out or apply for you, but most importantly, if you already have a playstyle that's grooving for you, don't stray far from it, even if it doesn't line up with everything I said. It's going to be much harder to completely adapt a new playstyle than do what you're best at with maybe a few tweaks from this video. Alright, that's it. Happy pushing, guys. I put a lot of time into writing all these down, so let's try to hit 5 likes on this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and until the next video, I will see you guys on the Battlegrounds.